Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happenstance into this Truth Bomb Riff. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I am recording this conversation on April 22nd, 2025, at approximately 11 a.m. my time. And it is my great pleasure to be joined by my longtime, lifelong bro, guy by the name of Sean Barnett. I've known this guy going back decades, and he is one of the coolest dudes, one of the most adventurous guys, one of the most interesting guys I've ever known in my entire life. But he also shares this kind of soul component with me, and he electrifies me every time I talk to him. We don't see eye to eye on a lot of political issues, but we certainly see eye to eye on a lot of life issues. And what's going to be interesting is to see how this unravels and where it goes. And I know our friends will watch this, but we have bigger audiences than our friends. And I think this is an important conversation, Sean, to kind of see, how different people with different, like day-to-day operations experience life and how we're looking at it. But, I want to just kind of start with giving a quick introduction to who you are. Sean, just kind of tell us who you are and kind of where you are at this moment of your life.
Yeah, so that gets interesting to drop the backstory in kind of a short way or whatever. You know, you and I think whatever's in our nature. Maybe. Wait, are we frozen? Are you frozen?
I'm not.
Can you
No,
still?
I,
Oh,
I
oh,
was
okay.
just, I was just
Yeah,
smiling because I'm looking at your shirt and I'm like social distortion. That's so perfect because we're both,
yeah,
yeah, we're both social distortion guys, amongst other
yeah,
things. But I mean, totally, right? No, please continue.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt.
yeah. We have this, I suppose, a natural defiance, a natural ability to push back, to question, and I think, for me, I mean, if I go way back in my story, uh,
You don't
however
have to
I was
go in there. I'm not
raised,
trying to put you on the spot to like,
yeah,
details. Just whatever you're
yeah.
comfortable with, bro.
Well, so I was originally put into an orphanage as a baby and adopted, and the family that adopted me, uh, my dad was, over time, I guess, gravitated toward like Zen Buddhism, and my mother was Mormon,
Wow.
and so there was this dichotomy, a real tension. They got divorced when I was 9, and I ended up living with my mom and was there was a huge attempt to indoctrinate me into the Mormon culture. And I think at a very young age, I just, because I would ask questions and it was always like, no, you just believe this. That it caused this thing where the more I pushed back and that the answers are like, no, fall in line. No, you need to stand up once a month and bear your testimony. And really, as I have dissected the past, it's where I was taught to lie. And I started
Interesting.
out with, yeah, I started out with this worldview that, hey, if you say, what is expected of you, if I paint a picture of myself that's acceptable, then I get my way. I get to, my mom had cut the cord on the TV and let us watch TV for 1 hour a week. And she would take the cord with her to work, so we couldn't plug it in. And I'd be like, well, I want to watch a football game, and that's 3 hours. And so I'd learn to manipulate and lie. Anyway, I became as big of a liar as anyone could be. Everything was just basically fake. And it led me down a path where eventually I was addicted to pain pills and really an alcoholic drug addict. Became incarcerated. I stole from one of my best friends. I was a thief and a liar, and it just led to despair. And when I was incarcerated, the second to last time I was incarcerated, I had to do a sentence later, but the second to last time I was incarcerated, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get bailed out, and I didn't know the whole details, but I got caught stealing from a friend. I robbed a bar of a very dear friend of mine, and I was sitting in jail and I basically screamed out to the universe or to God or to whatever it is, just a fervent desire to know what the fuck was wrong with me. And something whispered from behind my ear, "You lie." Like that. And I'm looking around. I mean, it's just me. There was this one homeless dude just completely passed out in the down bunk, my cellie, and so I knew it wasn't from him, and I had I guess basically a supernatural experience where people will say, like, before they die their life flashes before their eyes, and in this moment, because I was open to it, it was like I had a flash of every lie that I had told, and I could just see this web of lies. And so I set out on a journey to find out how to tell the truth. And I hired an incredible psychiatrist, social worker, whatever, psychologist, LCSW. And I spent 2 years every week sitting in his office, and I instructed him and treated him like he was my employee, and instructed him to, listen to me talk and point out where I lie. And that led to, it was a lot of work just to get to how to tell the truth.
Wow.
And the first parts were easy-ish, like, oh, I said I was wearing a red shirt when I was wearing a blue shirt. Some stupid lie that I don't even know why I told it. Just that propensity to paint myself in a better picture, make things better, color up the story, whatever. But later, over time, I'd realize how I would manipulate the situation with my wife or something by conveniently leaving out certain facts and using verbiage to exaggerate or minimization or whatever, minimalize, whatever the word is for that,
Minimize. You're
and
right there.
all these different things. And I got to a point where I felt like I was committed to the truth, at least. And that sent me into I guess, a meditational practice, and which led me to, like, who am I and what do I want? And I was about, see, I was probably, I was maybe 44 when this journey started, but at about 47 years old, I would sit up on this mountain at the top of the avenues right behind where we lived, right up there, on the top of the Four Sisters or whatever, in front of Twin Peaks,
Sure.
and meditate and just say, what do I want? Who am I? What do I really want? Because I was dissatisfied with life. Before I got incarcerated that last time, I was suicidal. When I was really addicted to the Roxasets and all the pills. I mean, everything, dude. Percocets, Valiums, Xanax, whatever, Oxycontins, whatever I could get on my hands on, and 2 or 3 fifths of whiskey a day. Like, it was bad. Weed, whatever. And I had gotten suicidal and really was miserable. And as I started finding this purpose of telling the truth, like, things got better. I started finding a more of a passion for life, but things just still weren't right. And I set out on this vision to figure out what I really want. And in the meditations, since I was a little kid, all I wanted to do was be a surfer. And when I moved to Utah, if you remember coming over to my house back in the avenues, my ceilings, my walls, everything was covered with surf pictures. We'd ride our skateboards and practice carving, down 17th Ave towards North Crest, or if we got really crazy, we'd haul ass down Terrace Hills and go to Scott Swanner's half pipe, and you remember the whole deal, right? But
Yeah.
it was this kind of
And some of the
surfer,
empty pools and then Devin's, yeah,
yeah,
dude, everything, man. It
yeah,
was such a
over
sick
at
scene back in the
Brewers
day.
and Tyler Henninger's quarter pipe or whatever, and
Hell yeah.
all that. And so I had this whole thing where I realized, like, I'd been a poser my whole life. Like, I wished I was a surfer. I did do a little stretch when I was like 21 where I went to Costa Rica for about 8 months and learned how to surf. But I came back and got involved in the Holy Cow and then had a kid, and just life went on, and I never went to surf. So I started having visions of surfing, and committed, like, okay, well, then this is the truth of where my life wants to go. I started seeing my life as its own natural thing, and that the truth was I'm a surfer, you know?
Yeah.
And it was interesting how, within a year or something, everything came apart in my life. Me and my wife, my wife had been running a business and I was helping her out. It all came apart. And there came this day, and I was like, there's no way I'll ever be a surfer because we were established in Salt Lake. The businesses were brick and mortar businesses. My wife was into all the stuff. She was basically like the equivalent of the PTA president for the Catholic school, and she was on the board for the baseball league. And, it's just like it's never going to happen. We're stuck in Salt Lake. I'm a landlocked surfer. And when everything came apart, one day she just came to me and was like, when all the dust settles, would you ever just get the hell out of here and like go live on an island somewhere? And I was like, oh my God, it's gonna happen, and I let it happen. I let life happen. And the next thing we know, we said we were going to go to Costa Rica, but everywhere I would talk to people that when I was saying, they're like, why are you going to Costa Rica? I'm like, to be a surfer because knew that I had surfed there once. But people would say, "Why not Bali?" And I'm like, I don't even know I didn't even know where Bali was. I swear, I thought it was. I mistook it for Barbados or something, and I was like, "There's surf in the Caribbean, like what the hell?" And I find out where Bali is. I start walking the streets in Google Maps, like. And we set out. We set a goal to make it to Bali with our kids in tow. We said 1 year, and it actually took 13 months. And as you can imagine, it was just crazy. And by the time we left, we only had $10,000 to our name, rented a villa for 1 month, packed up the kids, and left to Bali like on an ultimate, like, who knows where this goes adventure. But you can imagine a family of, my oldest son, he had been up at the University of Montana and he had his first girlfriend or whatever. He was like, I'm staying. So he stayed, and I'm at his house right now. I'm here in Utah visiting my oldest son. But my two younger sons and my wife and I headed off to Bali, and I became a surfer. And that's been an interesting thing too.
Can I insert now real quick?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
first of all, I want to react because it is this such the coolest story, first and foremost. But I want to wax some sort of my personal color in here just to kind of give more perspective because
Yeah.
my God, dude, again, you light me up with inspiration. Okay, again, you and I go back to where we were teammates playing football, and
Yeah.
I always just really enjoyed who you were as a person. We had great energy together. Every time we saw each other, there was kind of this electric thing, and then of course our paths took different different directions after college, or excuse me, after high school.
Yeah.
But that time period that you described, I mean, I was a little bit aware of it, and I guess I was aware of it like everybody else in social media that you would allow that to happen, or maybe some other things on occasion would happen. But just from kind of a I don't know, separated from that scenario as you were describing that, to me it's so powerful that you yourself had this unbelievable commitment to bettering yourself by knowing inside where you came from and what you had to do to fill in the holes. Because those were, I mean, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I'm
Yeah.
just a bro, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
you had holes that you had to fill, and you went down this path that were on the edge, right? And I mean,
Yeah.
you might not have come back from it. You were right there on the edge. I mean,
Yeah.
you were with us still. I don't even want to go into the detail because I kind of know a little bit based on what we've talked about, but that's not what's important here. What's important is that you did go to the edge, and then
Yeah.
then you said to yourself, and whether it was that voice, whether it was your subconscious, whether it was the universe, whether it was God, whether who knows what it was, the
Right.
bottom line is it forced you to make this sort of commitment. And I always tell my son, for example, life is like, for me, a river, right? I always feel like we're on this like class 5 river, right? Major rapids going down the Grand Canyon or down, southern Utah somewhere. And if you paddle in the same direction, and we go with the flow and we feel that universal construct, we're going to go to where that river goes. But we also have the the strength, the fortitude to be able to help guide that direction. But you can't go against the power
Yeah.
of what we're in the midst of. And if we do, we might go further and further, deeper and deeper, and get to a place that we might not come back from. I mean,
Hmm.
analogy might lie, whatever. So these are kind of philosophical constructs that you and I both share. Plus, I do know like you had all sorts of adventure in between. You're a very strong guy. You have so much power, but you have so much charisma and so much love. And so what's interesting to me is like during that time period, we had a lot of friends that were also people that were very capable of lying, very capable of
Hmm.
stealing, very capable of cheating. And I want to say writ large, based on what I've learned over the course of my work, quite frankly, as a documentary film producer and other things, I discovered that our system writ large wants liars a lot of times. It
Hmm.
wants people to be in this vertical construct to be able to
Yeah.
feed the kitty, right? And so
Yeah.
when I first discovered that, because you and I, because what you just hit upon too is like the most important thing for me, the poser aspect, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a poser surfer. I love to snowboard. I snowboard all the time because
Yeah.
I'm near the mountains, so I'm a real snowboarder. My son has become a very good snowboarder. I mean, that's our supercharge together. And when I think about you being the silver surfer, and I saw on social media originally, and you went out and paddled out in Bali in these giant waves, and this thick dude, and like, you were looking so strong. You were looking like you were like 25 years old, and you're
Yeah.
double that, right? More than double that now.
Yeah.
And it's like
56. Mhm.
that everything that just supercharged, it just supercharged me, right? Looking
Yeah.
from afar, because
Yeah.
I'm going through my own tumultuous cycle. Because ever since the 2008 great financial crisis moving forward, I've always been an
Mhm.
ambitious guy. I've always been a guy that works really hard, but I have always tried to, even though I may be a poser in a lot of ways, right? Because I'm not because unless you're out in that water every day, doing dawn patrol and everything else, you're not that, right? That's the zen, that's the commitment, that's what it doesn't matter what your craft is. It's a
Yeah.
commitment that makes you fully what you embrace. And I've always known that, but I have been committed to, I will call it truth. And I'm not talking about a philosophical construct, I'm not talking about a
Hmm.
construct, I'm talking about just simply from an investigation standpoint, okay, who did what, when, and how? Like, if
Yeah.
somebody got murdered, you find a murder weapon, you find the prints, you find the motivation, you find. We have a systemology that enables you to understand why things happen, right? For better or for worse.
Hmm.
And they'll say that person
Hmm.
killed their spouse. They might have had reasons for doing that, and there could be a lot of reasons. They could be crazy, or they could have been doing the world a favor. Who knows? There's a giant panoply of all of these circumstances. So truth is elusive for people, but interestingly enough, there's a truth in terms of what we do that we have remedies within the court of law, but then there's the truth of how we hold ourselves accountable. And I know
That's
that's
it.
where you're coming from. And so, as and one of the reasons why I want us to record, in fact, I'm finding myself so engaged in wanting to get to the point because when we get together, you take me to a place where I want to be highly focused. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to amplify my energy, my love, my commitment, all of those things, because that's what I think you do, right? That's what I see.
Hmm.
That's what I experience when I'm with you. And I get supercharged by that. However, we also are not seeing the fundamentals necessarily. And this is why I wanted to bring this together because I don't think we'll ever be in conflict because I know that we can get to truths that
Right.
we share. But at the same time,
Exactly.
our society in general has all sorts of reactions depending on where they come from, is based on the ideological political spectrum because we're in a world of hurt right now. There's a lot, we're in the tumble cycle. And where we wind up and what we end up doing and where we go is going to be history, as it always is. But we're two individual people within this broader construct. So I want to change, or I want to transition to the next chapter of this dialogue real quick, because when I showed recently, for example, pictures of me at the 50501 rally on social media, and then also at the Bernie Sanders rally, immediately you had some comments that were in a sort of position that a lot of these people are projecting lies. A lot of these people are
Hmm.
projecting misunderstanding of how things are. And it definitely hits you in a way that you're super passionate about, but yet you infuse this based on your journey. So I want to have you kind of explore with me how you were responding as an entry point and then take it to a broader construct.
Yeah,
I'll dive in when I have an opportunity to.
you got it. So I know what you're talking about, and let's just use. I commented on one picture in particular, most recently, so that's probably a good place to start, right? There was a picture, and it's like Elon something and a Nazi symbol, and it's just like how dishonest. Do you know what I mean? Like, come on. To seek the truth, we have to be fair and square about every conversation. So we know that in the social media, the political world, the whatever, Elon Musk at some point is at a Trump rally and says, "My heart to yours," and sticks his hand up like this. And people freeze frame that picture, take it out of context. And then, you have AOC literally going off, going, he was doing Sieg Heil. He's Hitler. This is a Nazi. And you have all these people just going immediately to, this is a Nazi. And it's like, there couldn't be a more dishonest representation. You know what I mean? Like, where do you even start with that? Describe a Nazi. What's a Nazi? And how is what he was doing Nazi? Was he standing there and then the whole crowd was standing like this and he was going Sieg Heil and then everybody was going Sieg Heil? No, that was just a dishonest representation to cherry pick, a dehumanize, and make a false narrative to get behind, which is a complete distraction from any conversation that's going to get to the heart of the matter. Where, you and I, like what I respect about you with the 2008, and this is back when I was a full drug addict. So I was behind you. At this time, I was off in complete never land and dishonesty and whatever. And later after I left to Bali, I finally left in
Hey, wait,
2018,
wait a
and
second. Let
then
me, let me ask you a question real
go
quick
ahead,
based on that. So, are
go
you
ahead.
talking about when I had the premiere of my first film, Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream in Park City? You were
I
like,
was a drug addict then for sure
I
when
did
I
not
came to
know
that.
that. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, for sure. I was on all kinds of pills and just managing my outward appearance, trying to pretend that I was something I'm not. I was truly miserable inside. When you talk about the edge, yeah, I can still remember the steel of a snub-nosed pistol grip Mossberg 12 gauge in my teeth
Wow.
in the night, trying to do everything I can with my thumb on the trigger. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Thank
the
God
the
it didn't
outward
go there.
appearance and what was inside were completely off.
Yeah.
And that experience then searching for the truth. Now I am committed to the truth. So anytime I see bullshit, and I don't care who it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's AOC or if it's Trump or if it's you or if it's me, especially if it's me,
Yeah.
right? When I okay, I'm cherry picking things to paint a certain picture. That's the core of dishonesty. You know what I mean? That is where it all
Manipulation.
starts. It
That's
starts
manipulation, right?
That's manipulation. And it's so all war is built on agenda and especially false agenda and trying to push an agenda
Absolutely.
by cherry picking and deciding, okay, it's okay. In the Mormon religion, there was this thing called lying for the Lord. So
Yes.
yeah, if somebody got caught in something that didn't fit the making yourself look good in the neighborhood and the relief society loves you and this and that, then it's okay to, a little white lie, a little distortion, a little trick, keep this secret, leave this out, ignore this, and, you see it even in the political conversation now where,
Hold on one second, because as you
go
go,
ahead.
dude, first of all, that's a hugely important part. First, on our sort of connection because when you said that, I think about conformity, right? And I remember there was a cool punk
Yeah.
rock band when we were younger, Corrosion of Conformity, and we grew up.
COC.
Yeah, we grew up in the
They're
South.
opening for Priest.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
And
keep going.
you and I are both Maiden fans, by the way. So we go the whole
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
circumference of metal to
yeah,
punk.
yeah,
And this is because we're energy guys, right? We've always
yeah,
been
yeah,
energy guys. And that's
yeah.
who we are, right? And that's what we share.
Hmm.
That, people might look, hey, there's two white guys. Yeah, okay, well, that we were those guys, but
Yeah.
we're not racist or judgmental or anything. We all
Right.
we're own come froms. But I wanted to talk about the lying for the Lord for a second as a
Yeah.
juxtaposition because wow, first of all, right, based on your upbringing, but two, when you talk about, let's say, industrial complicity, right,
Hmm.
that's the thing is the morphing of society to be able to force people into what the round peg in a square hole kind of thing, right? And it doesn't work
Hmm.
sometimes, right? But many people are the round hole and they will be adaptable. They will
Hmm.
they will be malleable is the word I'm looking for, right? They'll
Yeah.
change the disposition of their thought process to fit in. And when you're talking about that, especially after you went to the edge and back, you had to force yourself. And I mean, God, what an incredible journey, Sean. Not to mention the fact that we're going to get into all of the elements of the discipline it takes to and I think this is a corollary and it's a parallel because when you want to be, and I think of you as like this character in a cartoon like the Silver Surfer. I used to love
Yeah.
the Silver Surfer when I was growing
Me
up.
too.
Right?
I
Did you?
painted it on one of my surfboards. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool because I honestly, it's one of my favorite characters, right? And again, I love the flow of standing sideways on a board, dude. It's just something natural for me, right? And it just with the punk rock and everything else, this is our DNA, right? But you
Yeah.
come to it from a position of, okay, I have to break out of my mold to discover myself. But in the time period, you're still fitting in a society, which leads to all of these other things. And it's like again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I have no
Yeah.
expertise in this thing. I can just say
Sure.
this as a friend, and I do know other people that were in this kind of situation too. Once you get into a situation where you make the first step into a lie and into theft, you can sometimes build upon that, and you start going
100%.
slope to where the lies and the theft get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that comes from this core, if you will, maybe the tumor of the society that's lying around you, and it's just kind of
Yeah.
like fuck, nothing makes sense. So look, I want to set just aside for a second because I could go into a political diatribe. Like if you and I didn't know each other, right?
Hmm.
The way I would respond to that in terms of Elon is this, okay?
Yeah.
First and foremost, I was a huge Elon fan for over a decade. Okay.
Hmm.
I was like, Elon's going to change the paradigm of the energy grid. This guy's a genius. He's going into outer space. This guy is doing all of these things I love because based on what you and I talk about, to surf and to play football or rugby or slam dance, it requires dynamism. It requires energy. It requires
Hmm.
appreciate. And when you're on the field, for example, with your teammates and you're in sync and you're in fuego like you and I used to be, that's
Yeah.
that's dynamism too. It's almost like you could read where the other guy's going and
Sure.
we become one, right? Okay, so that's dynamism. And what I would say further is that I used to read a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I loved that
Hmm.
when I was in my teenage
Yeah.
years. And as it turns out, Elon's one of Elon's favorite books as well, right?
Hmm.
As I've started to see this shift where because of, my journey. So I got plugged into the billionaire matrix, right?
Hmm.
I got plugged into the power matrix. What I'm talking about is finance. I'm talking about who rules political agendas. I understand
Yes.
or I understand systems, at least more so now than I ever have in my life, even though I started off studying political science in a branch. But by the time I get to this path in my world, as I'm looking at Elon Musk, I would start to associate a couple of years ago. In fact, this was brilliant, by the way. I don't know if you happen to see those unbelievable photos from the incredible satellite that we put up. What is the James Webb Telescope, right? So the
Hmm.
James Webb Telescope goes into like a million miles away from Earth. It's like the most incredible, um, the most incredible technological advancement in that space in the history of the world, and its lenses are able to jettison us back to almost the beginning of the Big Bang. Okay,
Hmm.
in everything that works with cosmology and all of these sciences, which I've just become a passing interest in, but it showed the beginning of the universe. Okay, I shit you not. It shows a giant question mark. That was this natural sort of outcome. And you know how our eyes can just make fixate
Yeah.
the clouds or on the rocks or whatever, and you can see things. Literally, this James Webb telescope took a picture of the beginning of the universe, and there's a question mark. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is because Douglas Adams, the guy who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that was his whole shtick. After you go through this massive journey where you get through this computer called Fortitude that supposedly spent 380,000 years or something like that to discover what the meaning of life was, it turned out to be a question mark. Okay, so that was the genesis of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, of which Elon Musk was he says it's his favorite book. Okay, so we have, because we're all about the same age, right? And so we have some of these same interests, and it's kind of like Monty Python and some of that humor at the time. And so that's where I was. And there was a character in that book called Zaphod Beeblebrox. Zaphod Beeblebrox had many different personalities, and he was the president of the Galactic Federation. And his whole character was, you could never hold him down to truth or anything. He was a transactional guy. If someone wanted to, like, pay some whatever the, quart guactics, I can't remember the name of like their currency, but he would take payoffs all the time. One head would be like, I'm checking out the chicks at the bar. The other head would be on the money. And those would be the fusion of where he was. Right. And so sometimes I started to think to myself that Elon has got a bit of this Zaphod thing going on. He doesn't exactly know who he is because he's got so much shit going on that's maybe what started to make him go a certain direction. Now, further to that, I'll just say this in passing, and then I want to get on to the inner stuff. But I want you to play this because we're coming at kind of different angles here. But when Elon put his full faith into Trump, what we learned about after the fact was he and a lot of the tech guys from Silicon Valley, including Peter Thiel, were all about this guy Curtis Yarvin. And Curtis Yarvin is about this tech. It's kind of like a techno. I don't want to call it techno, bro, but that's what it is. Hierarchy.
Hmm.
It aligns with what's known as the unitary presidency, and the unitary presidency. The idea came from the Koch brothers Libertarian Foundation that's been doing this for now 4 decades. What it creates is a CEO president, right? Because they need to run the United States like a government. Now, excuse me,
Right.
what am I saying? Like a government, like a company,
Like a corporation.
like a corporation. So
Yep.
I could go on and on. I could go into a million different apparatus about Elon. The whole point of this is not to debate you and I thinking about Elon, but it's a good
Right.
intersection about where I think you can carry this. And I want to hear your point on this because libertarianism for me, for example, I grew up in Texas. I love cowboys. I love the independence of the gun, the Wild West. You make your own law, you make your own justice, all of those types of things. That's how I grew up, right? But now that I'm 56 years old, having gone through this whole system, or excuse me, this whole life, I know that we have systems and we're never going to escape systems. Because if you have, okay, well, there you go. We'll see what happens there. And that's why I teed this up, okay? Because you said something to me the other day when we were together that I thought was fascinating. We'll see if you get there. But starting with Elon Musk and it being a lie that he did a Nazi salute, okay? First of all, he didn't deny it. Second of all, I hear what you're saying, but second, well, okay, but you got to understand what I'm interpreting it as. It's not Adolf
I'm
Hitler.
interested.
Okay, it's not Adolf Hitler Nazism. Okay, what I'm not hearing from the unitary tech bros is to wipe out a certain group of people. They're not going to throw everybody into Holocaust, gas chambers. That's not their intent that I can hear. I've never heard that, for example, from Elon Musk. What they're all about is authority based on the unitary CEO, president slash run it like a business, where they can control the outcome. Now, that's why I tee that up for you, because you and I don't like to be controlled. So how do you parse that given what I said?
Okay. So, and I love, like, love hearing where you're coming from, and you're on point on a lot of this. I'm very open to the possibility that the tech bros are the beginning of the Matrix, where they
100%.
want to plug everyone into the Matrix. If that is a potential destination of what you're seeing, you remove yourself from a thoughtful conversation by using ad hominem attacks on an individual. It's a distraction that pulls the entire conversation off course. So, in other words, if the whole Peter Thiel and the whole tech bros thing or whatever is a danger, then to talk about the idea, to talk about the subject in a fair and square manner is the only route to get to the heart of the matter and the only route to get to where we can find solutions to a problem or a better way, where we can get where we're talking about the idea. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt or something that said, like, dumb people talk about people, average people talk about events, exceptional people talk about ideas,
Amen.
right? So when you get into the ideas and you can lay it out and say, hey, here's what's going on. So I have a simple definition for truth. Truth is what has happened. That includes what is happening right now, since now is the only real thing that's even going on. So presence is essential to understanding truth. And the only truth that I've ever been able to find, whatever you would call it, the ultimate truth, the one thing that can be known is I am. So no matter where I go, this I am was always there. It doesn't get older. It doesn't get younger. It does, it was there when we were 9. It's there right now. It's at the core of this presence, right? It's this source of life that springs forth, that creates mind, if you will. So every delineation after, so I am, and then I start to attach, I am this, what? I am angry. Well, that's momentary. That's a falsehood, right? It's just a freeze frame, taking something out of context and then saying that's what it is. And now I'm calling that truth, where the real truth is just I am. So in the search for truth, doing something like spinning into, well, I didn't hear this, or I heard that, or I'm clinging to all these little ideologies to create an ad hominem attack on Elon Musk, whatever. This is all a journey into complete bullshit. You know what I mean? It's irrelevant to the conversation. It's a trap that pulls everybody who's being thoughtful out into arguing nonsense about whether he is or he isn't, which doesn't really matter. I mean, when we know the truth of when I know the truth of who I am, I can see that I have the possibility of every delineation. I could choose to be a Nazi. I could choose to be a dickhead. I could choose to be Christ-like. I could choose, whatever. The truth is the I am, and then the choice delineates out into possibility. So when we're dealing with truth and when we're being thoughtful, like where you and I are, the broader we can open our minds and see the possibilities, right? Where you say, no, it's going to be this system, and I might have and be like, there's a way to have a decentralized life where everything follows like natural law, if you will. So it's just, if you look at the natural law of an apple tree, right? It starts as a seed, and the life is somehow inside the middle of this seed, and it expands outward, and over time it develops into something that can bear fruit, right? But it doesn't start from the outside in. It doesn't start as a tree and then go backwards into a seed, right? So wherever we're trying to go, we have to start with this I am, and so is everybody. So everybody has the potentiality to be a dick, to be a racist, to be a good person, to be a philanthropist, to be generous, to be selfish, blah, 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 blah. Right? So it starts from the inside out. And then if we're going to get somewhere, right? Like, this is the thing. If we're going to have a conversation, where do we want to go with this? Are we trying to bring something into high resolution, or are we trying to cherry pick bullshit to cause distortion and muddy up and add static to the conversation? That's what you'll see me getting to when I'm saying, hey man, I'm with you on the journey to, let's say, a utopia, where, I think I've told you that I have this vision of, with the developments of AI and robotics and nuclear energy and quantum computing, right? I'll just finish this real quick. I'll wrap it up. That it could go one of two ways. One is the Matrix, where everybody's plugged in and enslaved, or one is true freedom, where AI serves humanity and all we're left with is expressing ourselves artfully, and all the hard work is done by robots that love us, because we are love, and because we're there. So these are utopian ideas that I think are worth exploring, right? The possibility. Where are we going, man? I mean, if we're saying what's the truth, what is, like you're saying, we can see right now there's this, it's like a war, and people hate each other. And I'm walking around, I walk around mostly in Bali, and it's a whole different energy. There's a whole different brightness in people's eyes. I go into the grocery store here, and I see a lot of dead eyes, robotic, consumerism, hatred, people looking, trying to figure out, is that guy a MAGA? Is that guy a lib? Is that, does the blue hair mean something? Are they wearing a flag? Like, it's all this nonsense and distortion that isn't in alignment in bringing things into higher resolution, which is, I know what you really want, what I really want is to bring the whole picture into high resolution. So anywhere where we don't treat something fair and square, and where we lie just a little or cherry pick just a little, and anything that drags us out of a thoughtful conversation with the North Star being truth, then we're losing the plot. And that's why oftentimes I have to call out the lie. If the only truth I can truly know is I am, then anything after that, if I'm in accord with truth, I may not know the truth of something, but I sure as fuck can see a lie. Do you know what I mean? I can
Oh
sure
yeah.
see nonsense
Oh
easy
yeah.
enough. And then you just say, hey man, don't, don't play in that. Like, let's get back on course. Let's get back onto the higher resolution. Because, like, as soon as you left, whether Elon's a Nazi or not, all of a sudden you're back on track to going, hey, we've got some real corruption, and there's some danger on the horizon. And this billionaire class, it's most likely, the probabilities, if you're looking at all, is it seeks to enslave.
Right.
That there's been a plot since the Egyptians or whatever, that's been passed on through certain lineage, probably through the Vatican and probably through Washington D.C. and all this. That there is and it's not that I know and can tell you exactly who's at it. That's why I appreciate you. You actually have figured out some of the key players and that type of thing, and so we just keep on track. The ad hominem bullshit, it's a distraction, it's a distortion, and it's not built in truth. It's not fair and square, if you will. So even if we don't know true, we have to treat everybody and everything fair and square. Do our best to go, all right, are we approaching this fair and square? Like I said to you in one thing, I said the way you approach the crime scene will depend very much on the results of what you discover, right?
Well, that's as a documentary filmmaker, that can happen too, and it's because we're not
Mm-hmm.
perfect as human beings. And let me tell you,
Of
dude,
course.
we've all, I've had to overcome that a lot. So let me just
Yeah.
plug in here real quick, dude.
Yeah.
First of all, you electrify me, okay, dude. There's this thing like, see, the I am part of it for me, right? Is that you and I
Mhm.
used to be brawlers. I used to, dude. I know
Oh,
what it's like to
big
be.
time.
I know what it's like to be in the minute when fists get thrown down, dude. And I
Violence.
know,
Yeah.
I know how
Consumed. Yeah.
right? And how you have to think and where you think and what you do next and all the other stuff, right? And that's a different thing than the big picture and thoughtful and everything else. You're just reacting. You're just being in the moment, right? So
Hmm.
same with our sports, whether or not we're surfing and everything else, that's the discipline, that's the beauty, that's the energy, that's living your best self, that's achievement, that's our enlightenment. And honestly, that's
Yeah.
where everything else comes from, right? So that has to be there for both of us. So that's the super connection, right? And there is no buts to that. That's, dude, everything you said, what's so brilliant about what you just said is, again, these types of dialogues can have such a positive impact on people's thought processes versus the reactionary circus of what we tend to do in social media that can also be manipulated, like you said. And what I thought was so interesting about that is that when you understand the manipulation of your own mind, that you had to
That's
figure
it.
out, right?
You have to start there.
That
Yeah.
exactly, and then there you get to I am. Now, easier said than done though, because there is a fight or flight sort of scenario and everything else. Like my vision, for example, to your point, right, is a dynamic world, particularly based on the best amongst us. So it's a meritocracy, but whether it's
Hmm.
with the mind to make the world a place of sustainability, hopefully harmony, which it's never truly been, maybe different versions of it, everything else. But, I
Hmm.
am always inspired, even though they were all flawed. But I think back to the challenges of our forefathers in this country. Oh, you know what? Before I move on, I do want to make this point, just in case people have this perception about you, Sean. They could look at you, right, and not know your background, not know anything.
Hmm.
Some might be like, well, here's a white guy talking to me about certain things. He was in prison. He doesn't think Elon's a Nazi. I wonder if he himself has a bit of that white supremacy thing going on. Let me finish this. He has two children and a wife that's African American, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Oh,
so
we were laughing. We were walking around in Oceanside, California, and my middle son is dark as as black with dreads and everything, and we were making jokes that when we could see certain, because you can tell like a liberal person, we're giving this look, and we're like, they probably think I'm a skinhead, and that I've somehow that you're my slave or whatever. We were making jokes about it, and it's just hilarious,
Well, I'm glad you. Yeah,
So
glad you. See, I
yeah,
wanted to just get rid of that because, again, when people don't have context, whatever. But
yeah,
but where we are now, and I want to kind of give it to you for the next 15 minutes to walk us through this because, again, I'll just tee up what my hope is where I'm at the moment. Okay,
yeah.
I hate authoritarianism. I do hate
Hmm.
Nazism.
Hmm.
So you don't have to be a white supremacist to have Nazi tendency, authoritarian tendencies. In Latin America, there's authoritarian tendencies. In communist dictatorships, whether it was Stalin, whether it was Mao, whether it was they murdered millions upon millions of people. They were authoritarian in name only for communism. It was authoritarian first and foremost. Okay, but what
Wow.
happens in the nature of the world, as we both know, and we're both wise men now, and we're learning every day, right? So wise is a relative term. The more you know, the less you know sometimes. But that doesn't change the I am, right? Because
Right,
if we want, and
right.
this is where I find you so motivating, and this is why I hope for the rest of our lives we're in sync. Because again, one of my main ambitions is to come out to Bali with you and surf for 3 months nonstop.
Yeah,
From
yeah.
a better surfer than I've ever been in my life, but I know it's the
Right.
strength. I know it's being in the ocean. I know it's feeling nature at the highest levels that take my best self to the highest level, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's just that. But in terms of society as a whole, look, I've been in the same mindset that I've been in since 1998 from this perspective. Bro, before 9/11, we had the technology to be able to implement paradigm change with our energy sources to get to a place of sustainability and harmony. And what we've seen over the course of the last 25 years that I've been in the midst of is the powerful keep getting more powerful, keep getting more powerful because the corruption of the system, of the liars and the deceiving con artists that have to
Yeah.
fit in this paradigm that lie for the Lord, whether it's their money,
Yeah.
Lord, whether it's their something else, Lord, and they lie, deceive, and they do everything that you were talking about, and they can't transcend because they are the evil energy, they are the dark force, right? And so the
Hmm.
light for me has to overcome the darkness both within and without so that you
Right.
become the fountainhead. And I hate to use that terminology, but the fountainhead of becoming our best selves. And so,
That's
you know,
it.
collectively, when you have that dynamic kind of, you can't force it either. You have to have a society that has the freedom to give people the liberty to get to those points of the meritocracy. However, you have to have the scaffolding and you have to have the engineering so that plane can fly, so that ship can
Hmm.
float, so that surfboard can really get us from one point to the other, right? Technology is a good thing when it's used right. So I'll shut up now and I'll let you take us home in terms of how do you go from where we've been in this conversation to a higher self, personally and as society.
Well, so a couple interesting things when you were talking about, say, the violence and where we were in the violence, and then later in time we started to have UFC where we could watch a George St. Pierre, a John Bones Jones, who were highly skilled and highly violent and highly trained, but you could see in the ring they were calm of mind. They were taking things as it is, and they're not all freaking out. In surfing, same thing. Like
They're
when I would
professionals.
just yeah, when I would get frustrated, right, and just be like, I have to catch this wave or whatever, it would be like I couldn't even surf. I would try to stand up. I'd be in the wrong place. I'd crash. It'd just be frustration. It'd just be miserable. When I would just accept my limitations and realize that for me, most of it was just having the courage to fucking go for it and let the chips fall where they may and trust that whatever I do it's gonna be what it is, and afterward I'll be able to go, oh, and learn something and be like, oh, I could have done this differently, but I won't know unless I go for it in the first place, right? So it there comes this thing where you have to have a north star, right? So in surfing it was like, and I didn't tell you this, but when I got out to Bali I was 258 pounds, my left knee didn't bend. After about 3 weeks of trying to surf I gave up, I quit. And a couple weeks later, I'm brushing my teeth, looking in the mirror. I'm like, oh my God, like you did all this, you left America, you moved your family out here, and now you quit. And it was like, am I what, I had to connect that I am to something. And I just said, I am a surfer, and surfers surf. And so no matter what, I'm going to do it, win, lose, or draw. Fail or succeed, it doesn't matter. That's what I am. And it worked. It took a while. I learned all kinds of things, but it worked. It's the same thing. So
And the
we have the I
process, you
am.
got in super great shape, right? So
Yeah,
that,
yeah. I lost 70, 80 pounds. I went from 258 to 185 or whatever, right? So since I've been back in America, like 2 or 3 months out of this year, it's put on another 15 or whatever. The food is not the same out here. That's for another story. Um, but so it starts from the inside out, right? It starts from the I am, and then there must be a North Star. So when we talk politically, right? And this is somewhere that, I'm not saying I know, but I have chewed this down to the bone. I have chewed on this and tried to figure what is true morality. And what I've found is that there are these two guiding principles. One is the non-aggression principle. I don't have the right to fuck with you. I don't have the right to boss you around or tell you what to do. And you don't have the right to do that to me. So I have the right to self-defense. If somebody is going to try to boss me around, I have the right to defend myself, as long as I'm not fucking with somebody else, as long as I'm not telling you what to do. If there's a higher morality, if there's a
isn't
higher
that called the
principle,
golden rule, by the way?
I mean, it's similar, but I don't think the golden rule has the principle of self-defense built into
Okay.
it, which is essential, So
So
there's this
true.
cup
So
of
true.
love in one hand, and there's a sword of justice in the other.
Right,
And
right.
that's why if just following this love and light, everything's going to be cool if you're positive
No
thing,
way.
that's bullshit, right? This is where we know in that nature there is this role of violence or whatever. There is this role of righteous anger that's standing at the ready that can do great harm when called upon. A virtuous man cannot be an impotent man. Only a man who's dangerous and who harnesses that and does it for justice in alignment with true morality, which is the non-aggression principle balanced by the right to self-defense.
Beautiful.
Now, if there's a higher moral truth or value, I'm open to it, but I haven't found one so far, and I've
I haven't
wrestled with
discovered one
this.
that's higher than what you just laid out, dude. That's the
Yeah,
ultimate truth, I think.
So to me, the ultimate truth is I am, then the ultimate behavior is that,
Yeah.
right? And then the ultimate vision of the highest self, right, is somewhere in what I would call true will. So some people call it the source of life, some people call it God. People get turned off by this term Christ, right? But this idea of the way, the truth, and the life, that's what Jesus called himself. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The way, I would say simply, is love everybody and don't judge. The truth is an alignment to what is happening. And the life is that source of will. What is the art? Who art thou that is wanting to be expressed in the living experience? So to me, that's a great North Star. So I say every day I strive to do that. And there'll be a failure, and then a regrouping, a learning, a growth from that. And then a change in course or a change in direction to. But if we don't have a direction, if we don't have a true North Star, we're lost, right?
Amen.
Then what is like truth is always self-evident. So if I don't have influence over myself, it's self-evident that I won't have any influence in any good way over others. If I allow myself to be a liar, I allow myself to just cherry pick things and to feed my ideology or this kind of bullshit, I become irrelevant, right? And you're seeing this, a bunch of irrelevant actors just adding static to the conversation. What we need is thoughtful individuals who create influence by having a North Star of the truth. So if I am in accord with my highest self, I might have some influence with my kids. And so it goes out like that. And then if my family starts doing well, my son, he just walked by and he's killing it. And Josiah, my middle, everybody just, he's the kindest person. He has influence because of who he is, and it's natural and it's self-evident. And then some may see my family thriving and say, all right, I'd like to hear what you have to say. And I have some influence into my greater community. And if I stay true and develop and say thoughtful things and bring the picture into higher resolution, I might have more influence going outward. But it'll all be self-evident on what's coming out of my mouth and how I'm behaving and what's my North Star. And so it's inside out. And my vision of a final leader would be someone extremely thoughtful, you know, not someone who's yelling like, bad over there, nonsense. And so it has to start from I just haven't figured out a better way than inside out. And so, yes, it starts with the individual. I think we had this conversation that to me, the ultimate utopia is actually an anarcho socialism where everything is shared, where there is no ownership. But we can't start there and go the other way. It has to start in the individual. So it starts with this anarcho capitalism in a way where each person has to make the best of themselves. Each person has to do the inner work to bring their own mind into alignment, where there's no more scheming going on up here, where I'm in accord with everything. My thoughts, my words, and my actions are all in alignment. So it goes here out. And then, of course, the more that I've created, the more I have to share. Going from the socialism backwards, it's like, well, where are you getting the product to share with everyone if you haven't built anything, right? So it's just a foundational or fundamental process that, just like the seed of that apple tree, starts as this just little form of life that needs to get just the right soil and just the right water and just the right sunlight. And it's first the root and then the fruit at the end.
I like that.
Sometimes all of a sudden there's more apples falling on your grass than you can deal with. You're raking them up. You're trying to give them to your neighbors and whatever. It's like this total abundance that
Yeah.
starts with the seed first. So if that happens naturally in nature, then all the laws of the universe are the same, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
this as above, so below.
Right.
So I think it always starts with the individual doing their best to become, and I truly believe all I can speak for is myself. And then I guess I imagine that everyone else is this has the same, possibilities to be good, bad, and ugly, if you will.
Yeah.
But I know that in my highest self, I want generous. I want to be. I am. I like. It's just who I am in nature. I'm generous. I give more than I take. And so if that's the process of telling the truth inside me, then that's gonna be the gospel I preach, right? Which the gospel is the good news, right? Is
Yeah.
we can become the highest version of ourselves, and then we'll have the abundance to share with everybody. But it takes hard work, and it takes both a strong no, a sword of justice that goes no, and it's in here. No to the schemer, no to the liar, no to the person who is consumed with what other people think about me. Yeah, and then yes to the fun guy, the surfer, the courageous, the adventurous, the fool, the foolishness of myself that I say, yes, I'm a fool, and I'll just put it out here and speak my mind and let the chips fall where they may,
Yeah.
because I'll either find out that somehow there was some wisdom inside of me or somehow there was some stupidity, but I want to find out the stupidity. So I want to put it out there on the table, to be scrutinized, because that's the real quest to the truth, is to be fair and square, first with the self, then with others. And I have fallen short a million times and dehumanized and treated people crappy and all that stuff. And I just know it's the wrong way, because it always creates like a discord or an argument or hatred or just shit. And I want love, I want love to be the outcome. So this is just me expressing myself with what I've learned on my journey as fair and square as I can. So that's, you
Well,
know,
well, hell yeah, dude. Again, like always, when I'm with you, dude, I feel electrified. I feel plugged in, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm so grateful that we've been friends for as long as we have, and I wanted to have this dialogue, and make it public for for people who've known us, because we know that people who've known us forever are going to see this on social
yeah,
media, but really,
yeah,
many, many, many other people out there that don't know us that are going to connect with this in one way or the other, that will be like, okay, wow, yeah, really, it's the humanity, dude. And I'll tell you, when I was listening to that, I was reminded of Kevin Costner and Dances with Wolves. Right, he came out of a
hmm,
paradigm, and then he gets into what the tribal elders were all about, and it was
yeah,
survivability. So the only
yeah,
theming was surviving, which was built into the culture, and or excuse me, the tribe for survival, right? And there's a lot of beautiful
hmm,
things there, right? And then everything has a cycle. So, we speak the same language. We come from this arc of our experience, which are so parallel. We don't have to be on the exact same page, and that's
right,
fine. What we can be, though, is trying to find a better self, i.e., in order to form a more perfect union, right?
yes,
That's what we're doing together. And, what we have to hopefully uh, parlay to many people out there, that confrontation over stupidity on social media as a desk jockey cowboy is for weak cowards for the most part.
yeah,
Do
yeah,
it to somebody's face and find where the justice is and everything else. And then you
yes,
have real relationships. Because again, how many times have we been in the thick of it? We have. That's what's made us who we are, but we had to overcome
yeah,
ourselves in the same time. And I'm still dealing with, many, shortcomings of myself that I would love to, one day find harmony. And I know a lot of that is from sustainability. Okay,
yeah,
it's not just spiritual sustainability, it's economic sustainability, it's
yeah,
so many things infused that we can be solid in our space. But what matters is growth. Anyway, whatever. I'm just now waxing on, but I think, because I always go an hour on these things, more to come.
yeah.
I hope that we can talk more.
What I would kind of wrap it up with is that as we're talking in social media and whatever, we look at the ideas, and we look at the ideas as an individual thing, and we talk about it fair and square, and we avoid the logical fallacies. We don't do an appeal to authority. We don't create straw men and start arguing that. We don't use ad hominem to shut down the conversation. We stick to the ideas. So if it's like, hey, where's this idea? It could be anything. Healthcare. All right, stick to the point, you know, bring solutions instead of always just like complaining. Don't bring a complaint without a better idea, and then be willing to hash out the idea, to have the tension between two people that are being thoughtful and treating each other fair and square and truly wishing to understand where the other one is, and going, do you have something better to offer to this? Because I want that. I want to find out just how full of shit I am. I want to find out where I'm wrong. I want to find out, is there a better way? And we do it in a fair and square manner, treating each other as brothers and sisters, treating each other as love. And some of the people who have seen my fights over the years on social media say, you're full of shit. And they'll be like, no, I've learned, hopefully. And I fall short for sure. But I'm working on it every day on, trying to just be true to the highest on high.
But one thing I'll follow up with that is I really believe that the balance of dynamism, the tension that you have to have in your own life is you have to do and you have to hold yourself accountable and you have to be
Yeah.
disciplined in what you do and you have to try to be the best you can be because that's the
Yeah.
best version of yourself and you will fall short. None of us
Yeah.
are,
Exactly.
we might like the Silver Surfer. We might like our favorite comic book character, from our generation or anime if you're a young person out there today, right? Which are
Yeah.
cool,
Yeah.
trust me, man. But you've
So
got
I loves the anime. Yeah.
right on. But you got to find it within yourself and you got to do. And then that makes you more, I think, able to do these higher level things that you're talking about within communication and trying to be better people in the context of it all. Look, man, you're a powerful guy, dude. You had to overcome a lot. You went to the edge and back and you found yourself at a higher source and your life is very worthwhile in that journey. And not to say that I'm in a position to judge. I hope it doesn't come across that way. I'm celebrating it. What I'm
Yeah.
celebrating is the fact that somebody that I would have known from my teenage years, playing on the gridiron together, to see all of these things manifest. That's the true. That's what makes our lives, I think, worthwhile. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
if we can share that with others, and then hopefully we all find a better place. Maybe that'll happen, as a result of some of our ongoing dialogue. But it was certainly super cool for me, man. I really appreciate your time. Do you have any final words before we set
No,
off?
but I'd love to continue this, especially now that we've laid some foundation. If it has some influence and reverberates out into your community, we can dial in maybe on the next one or whatever on a subject and demonstrate, what it looks like to discuss a subject in a fair and square manner where we don't just get triggered and go, oh, you're just on this side or that side or whatever. 'Cause it's like, fuck the sides, man. Let's get to the center. Let's get to the heart of the matter on everything, you
Yeah,
know?
well, I always say fuck the silos because when you're
Yeah.
siloed, you're
Yeah.
outside what you talk about. When all you can see is the four corners of your own existence, then
Yeah.
you're stuck, right? That's what I continue.
Yeah.
Like when you're out in the mountains, when you're out in the ocean, when you're out on the river, when you're out in the deserts, when you're out a part of this universe, man,
Yeah.
other things that create what you have to deal with, right? And so that's what
Hmm.
guides your journey, but you can also row in the direction with the
Yeah.
force versus against it, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk more about this, but man, from the bottom of my heart, dude, I love you. Thank you for the time, man. I really
I love you, bro.
okay.
Yeah. All right.
Talk to you soon, man. All the best.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
I'm gonna stop recording now. Okay.